So all right, so let's go ahead. So we're gonna jump into kind of the final act here. So this is a good time to kind of reintroduce Jessie, right? So Jessie is Emilia's wife when she was, Manitas. And we kind of find out that she was unfaithful during this time frame when they were together, and so she's like returned to Mexico with the kids, and she's kind of going out and seeing this guy, and this leads to this like kind of altercation with Emilia because Jessie ends up she's going to get married to Gustavo, who she had a fling with back when Manitas was still around and everything, and they get into altercation over the kids, and Emilia like literally like attacks her, right? And not sitting here, I'm not going to get into all the domestic violence type of stuff. Like there's already enough challenging subjects in this, but I mean, once again, I know that the movie wants us to kind of like give away hints, at least to Jessie, that who this is. Jessie doesn't pick up on it at all because I don't think she doesn't figure it out until the very end. But just once again, goes back to we're trying to create this good character, and well, yeah, we can understand that Emilia is going to have that struggle with dealing with the situation. Like, I think Emilia as a character has to understand that for Jessie's mindset and for the kids' mindset, their father is dead, right? So, I think you've mentioned a few times, and I agree with you, that ultimately the character feels like she's very selfish for wanting to constantly try to integrate them back into her life, even though she's not very open about everything that's going on. And this causes Jessie to kind of flee with the kids. And Emilia, right, she in retaliation has Gustavo, right, the fiance, he gets beaten up, right, and he's pretty much like threatened, like, you have to leave town, and you need to get out of here. And then Emilia freezes the bank accounts for Jessie, being like, hey, you're not gonna get away from me or anything like that. So in a total escalation, Jessie and Gustavo end up kidnapping Emilia for a ransom. And I don't even really know where to start with all this, because it's just like, you're not showing us wanting to like this character, right? Like you tried a little bit to show that this character is like trying to turn over a new leaf, but like as we go throughout, like we just see more and more of why we shouldn't like this character. Now, I'm not here to talk about Jessie's fiance Gustavo. Like, I know there's obviously some probably skeletons in the closet there, but it just once again kind of created this character that I feel like we as an audience want to root for. And they just once again they're almost like going back down the dark path that they went through before. And I wasn't a fan of it. Is there anything else you want to add to that? I know I don't want to beat a dead horse with this, but it just feels like it's just another example of why we can't really get behind this character.
I mean, the fact that you have this altercation between Jessie and Emilia, I feel like that's a tell right there. Like, that really pulls you out of the story, because whatever story they're trying to create, as soon as that happens, it's like, okay, yeah, I can't watch this. This person is a piece of shit.
Yeah, I agree. There's just too many problems that are going on for it. And while it maybe is a more realistic interpretation of like what would happen, and just like having someone be upset, like, hey, my kids are being taken away from me, I can't really be upfront with it. Like, I could understand kind of the internal struggle someone would be going through.
But it's the lack of honesty on Emilia's part, because because at every turn she had an opportunity to sort of come clean and maybe not go down the path that we're seeing on film, but for whatever reason, she just feels it's better to just be silent about it, and this is what happens. She ends up losing a few fingers as a result.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, that's a great segue to our kind of like ultimate conclusion here. Is like, yes, she's getting ransomed. So Rita receives a package with a few of Amelia's fingers. So Rita ends up being like, "Hey, I'm gonna get a group of people together, and we're gonna go get Amelia back." This kind of leads to our climax where these people from Gustavo and Jesse's side are attacking like Rita and some of the people that are working with Amelia, and there's this kind of big firefight. Gustavo ends up escaping with Rita, and they put Amelia in the trunk. And like before this happens, Amelia is kind of like sitting there, and she's kind of talking to Jesse about like everything that they kind of did, right? Trying to show or prove that Emilia is indeed Manitas, the husband that she thought is dead. And you kind of go through all this, and Jesse's reaction, which I mean, I don't know how I would react to a situation like that, but it seems to be kind of a silly reaction because you have Jesse and Gustavo up in the front of this car with Amelia in the trunk, and Jesse's like, "Hey, as we're speeding away in this car, this is a perfect time to have a giant altercation where I'm going to pull a gun out on Gustavo." And I just was like, my eyes, like, they just rolled right into the back of my head. Because this is like every stupid cliche thing where, like, whenever there's like a big car chase or something's happening, the most logical thing is just to stop the stupid fucking car, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like everyone's always like, no, I'm just going to keep flooring it. So while I'm fighting with someone, I'm going to keep flooring it as I'm like dangerously close to this cliff. And it ends up like, they end up just like driving off the side. The car explodes, and all three of them dead. And I'm just like, oh, okay, that was stupid, right?
It was very much over the top because it wasn't enough for the car to crash into a gully and that's it. It had to explode into flames, and yeah, that's when you know they're dead. Like like throughout this entire movie, I kept thinking they're really dialing it up to 11. Like they're just it's campy and they're overdoing it on everything. It's not enough to have a story about someone who's transitioning to a female. We have to make it a musical. It's not enough for this person to be someone who's supposedly trying to turn a new leaf. She still has all these bodyguards and henchmen at her disposal, right? And it's not enough for them to be dead from a simple crash. The car has to explode and everybody gets barbecued on the inside. Like they just keep making it weirder and weirder and making it more exaggerated than it needs to be.
Agree. I totally agree. Like there was a much more subtle way we could have done something like this that would have, to me, had a lot more impact, right? Because I think ultimately, right, the movie ends with like Rita kind of telling the kids about the truth of the situation. And we see kind of like Amelia, there's like some type of, funeral procession that's happening, because it's a musical, is this actual people that are there or are these people that are just part of the musical? I don't know, but it's just a very bizarre ending, and it made me kind of realize like this movie had an opportunity to do something good, but instead I felt like it just fell into it tried to check too many boxes instead of just focusing on elements that could have made this good.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I feel like there must have been some sort of secret checklist that the director knew about, and that's why they included all these elements in order to, get a shoe in for the nominations.
Yeah, like why not just like it could have been just a story of a person transitioning, right? And they could have maybe had maybe like a terrible skeleton in their closet that they had to overcome, right? Like maybe they accidentally killed someone in rage, right? Like they were just like, this person was making fun of them because of the way they looked, and they just kind of, got to the moment, there was just this altercation, maybe like it wasn't really their fault, but kind of was, and they have to kind of overcome this. Like that would have been an interesting thing to see a person go through that individual story of how to overcome something. But instead you have someone that transitions that also is a drug cartel boss that like has this like nonprofit organization that's finding their deceased loved ones, that also has like this whole love story that he's trying to deal with, that has this, kind of ridiculous shootout at the end to kind of capture the story. I'm like, it's just you're trying to do too much, and I think that's the problem I have with it, because I think for the most part, like, we see some really good moments with the characters, right? I think I think Zoe Saldana does a good job in this movie. She definitely feels like she gets way too much screen time at the beginning, which I feel like absolutely should have been going to understanding Manitas' character before the transition. And I think that the actress that played Emilia, she had some good touching moments during that sequence. Like, just like, I think back to kind of when she's in the bed with her daughter, and the daughter's like, you smell like my daddy. And you just kind of see like the emotions kind of waft over her face. Like, I get that, right? I can understand that, but there's just too much of the other stuff that doesn't work, and there's moments that stuck out to me as positive, but overall it was just a mesh. So I'm gonna go ahead. I just gonna wrap up here with a score, because to have this be nominated and win, right? And I think it won in the Golden Globes, at least, not the Oscars, but the Golden Globes. I think it won Best Picture for like a drama and comedy, or I don't forget what's the category. Maybe it's comedy and musical. What's the category? Do you know?
I mean, yeah, it's probably comedy musical.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, I can't say I've watched them all, right? But like, to me, I feel like the bar was not very high with this. It felt like a movie that it wanted to do so much, but in order to do so much, it just failed on to meet each of the storylines. Nothing kind of gave the closure I think it needed to have, because you wanted to focus on all this stuff. And the music's, for the most part, I just didn't really care for. It just, there's so many times there's just random characters singing, some of them with very little, if any, musical talent. There are some songs that kind of stuck out. But I mean, overall, like, when I think of a musical, I really want a lot of those musical numbers to really hit. And I think for the most part, outside of like maybe one or two, like, I was just like, it's pretty forgettable as far as that goes. So I would say, if I'm going to give this a grade, right, I'm going to give this like a 1.8 out of 5. I think there's some good bits in this. I think there is some, like, definitely like technical things. There's some really strong cinematography. Like, some of the transitions they do are very interesting. So like, it had like a lot of the stuff that's out there, but I feel like I'm very connected with the story of this movie, as far as like, that's what I like to see in my movies, is a strong story. And I just never really could get behind the story, this characters, or what they're wanting us to get out of this movie.
All right, so you were giving it a 1.8 out of 5.
Yes.
All right, I'm giving it a 1.5 out of 5. I said this at the very beginning. This was a movie that was made in bad faith. I mean, this was a movie simply made for the sake of winning an award. It didn't care who it had to step on in order to achieve its goal. It just wanted the award. Now, remember when we did our review of American Fiction last year?
Yes.
And we were talking about how the protagonist basically had to give into stereotypes in order to be successful, right?
Yes.
Because before, he was just a university professor who could barely make a name for himself as a writer. What I really liked about that movie was the fact that it took the general stereotypes of the Black community and sort of took the piss out of it. So
Yes.
so throughout the entire movie, we knew that everybody was in on the joke. I mean, they're basically saying, okay, this is what you think of us. All right, we'll go ahead and go along with it, but we're not going to play it the way you're expecting it to be played. And as a result, they took these stereotypes and they had fun with it, and it was a good movie as a result.
Fantastic movie.
Now, with Emilia Perez, you're doing the same thing. You're taking these stereotypes of Mexicans and trans people and putting it on film. The problem is that they're playing it straight, pardon the pun. And as a result, it suffers as a movie because it's trying so hard to be serious. It's comical at the end. No, I will say this. I really think Zoe Saldana is the only person who actually plays it straight, who's actually taking it seriously. Because everybody else, you kind of have to wonder what the hell's going on with their character. Because like I said earlier, Emilia is very much a selfish person who's really in it for herself. Jessie as a person, I feel like she's equally selfish, but you could sort of understand why to a degree, just because she's in a marriage with someone who isn't all there as a result. Now, had they made the movie and done it in a way where they sort of lean into the stereotypes and just let us know, hey, we're not going to take this seriously either. We know this is what you think of Mexicans and gay people or trans people, but we're gonna have a little bit of fun with it. I think it would have been a little bit more palatable as a film. Now, another thing I will say too is that as a movie that's trying to represent, and I'm gonna be generous here. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that they were trying to make a movie that was representing trans people, right? You could have done a far better job in making us, sympathize with the character.
Absolutely.
Now, I did mention Trans America earlier. I think that's a great movie, and I think it does a far better job in representing the struggles of a trans person when they're undergoing transition. Because you mentioned earlier how if we had seen some sort of sordid past, a skeleton in the closet that they're trying to ameliorate, I think that would have been far more interesting. What we see in Trans America is Bree, the protagonist, who who is on her way to get the final surgery to fulfill her goal of becoming a woman, when she finds out that she has a long lost son from an affair from way back when. And at first she's very hesitant. She doesn't want to confront that past, but throughout the entire movie, she comes to realize she has to accept this long lost son and make peace with who she was as a person in order to move forward, right? And as a result, that movie is far more compelling as a result, because you can see where she's coming from and where she's going. Here with Emilia Perez, I mean, you don't really want to know what the skeletons in the closet are, because they're very unpleasant, right? And we see it when she starts at organization, and you kind of get the feeling, I think this is probably something we don't really need to know that much about, because I think you and I can both agree that's the kind of stuff we really can't get behind, honestly. So the fact that you have a character like this who is a drug lord and who's let's be honest, who's basically spending most of her time going around killing people to eliminate the competition, it really doesn't, right off the bat, it doesn't make them that great of a character. And then to go behind someone's back and orchestrate these elaborate schemes in order to live their quote unquote authentic life, I think it just comes off as a really, really bad move. And then later on to become very, very overzealous to the point of attacking the mother of your children to keep them, in the house. I think that just proves that this person isn't someone we can get behind. I mean, if we're supposed to sympathize with them because they're trans, good luck in trying to sell that, because it's not working whatsoever.
No.
And I think what they should have done really was, and I mentioned this already, if they had made Manitas someone who's like a lower level thug in the organization, who's sort of skimming money in order to save it for that operation, right? I think that would be a bit far more compelling, because it'd be a bit more realistic.
Yes, we need more relatable stakes, right?
Right, because they're facing a risk from so many different sides. They're facing a risk of being alienated from their family, but they're also having to deal with the risk of possibly losing their life because they're doing something like that, embezzling money in order to try to, become the person who they feel they should be. I think that would be a far more interesting movie to watch than simply someone who has all this money and has decided, all right, I think today I'll just become a woman, because why not? Another issue that I have is the fact that we're talking about a French director who's decided, I'm going to make a movie that's set in Mexico and it's going to be focusing on drug cartels, right? I kind of feel like it's a really really bad move, and
Yeah.
and a lot of Mexicans have even said this movie portrays us in a very bad light, and I can understand why.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
and I would even say, I would even say, if I was Mexican, I would say, listen, I can understand if the Americans made a movie like this because we're used to getting shit from the Americans, but you, a Frenchman, a European, you're supposed to be much better than that. Like you're, I thought Europeans were supposed to see things a lot more clearly, but no, apparently you're just as bad as they are. You see us as narcos who wear cowboy hats and sombreros and drink tequila and basically attack everybody for no apparent reason. So I think it's such a terrible move to just lean on these stereotypes rather than try to tell an authentic story. I don't. I don't think it is going to get the award for Best Picture or whatever. But who's to say? I mean, maybe people will overlook Carla Sofia Gascon's tweets and just go with it because it's a musical about a trans person. But I feel like there are just so many different elements that worked against it. That I mean, really, it's the proverbial stepping into the rake right there. Like you didn't have to do what you did, but you did it anyway, and you shot yourself in the foot as a result.
Mm-hmm.
And one other thing too, I feel like it's getting pretty old, trying to lean in all these stereotypes because as I mentioned earlier, American fiction takes the stereotype and just has fun with it. It rolls with it, but it also knows that not all Black people are like that, right? I wish what they could have done was kind of show a different side of Mexican society rather than just lean on the fact that apparently the whole country is occupied by narcos and drug cartels. But I guess for whatever reason they're playing to the gallery and they're just saying, "Hey, we know it's if we included other elements to make Mexicans look civilized, you wouldn't know it was Mexico. So we have to lean in on this, so you'll know it's set in Mexico." So I just feel like overall this movie, just it was just made in bad faith. I'm sorry to keep saying that, but that's what I keep thinking over and over again as I watch this movie, because it even if it was trying to represent the trans community in a different light, I think it failed tremendously. I'm not surprised that Mexicans are pissed off about this because it puts them in a negative light, and I think it just kind of puts filmmaking in general in a bad light because it's no longer about telling a really really good and compelling story. It's just simply making a movie for the sake of winning an award.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope this doesn't set a precedent for future filmmaking, but you never know, really.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you want to add?
No, I think you wrapped up really well. I just, it feels weird, like, to see this get all the nominations, and just like I think both of us agree after watching it, it just doesn't feel like it's warranted. I think there's always this like kind of gap with, kind of the critics versus the audience, right? Like us just lay people that are watching something, and then the critics are sitting there saying something totally different. I think like on Rotten Tomatoes, like this didn't get a huge overwhelming. I think it was something like 70%. So it's like, it just seems like there's so many of these like things that are just not working for it. So to see it kind of get pushed out there into the limelight like it is, it just, I feel like it's out there for the wrong reasons.
That's not sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I kind of wonder if there's like certain agents within who are actively promoting and pushing this movie to be.
Oh yeah, I mean Netflix. Netflix was even talking about that, right?
Yeah.
Like they were like, yeah, we're really pushing this for award season, and then like the past tweets from I forget, help me out with the name.
Carla Sofia
Gascon, thank you. Came out and they're like, oh well, now we're gonna stop doing all that, and I'm just like, I don't want to sound like an old person, punching at clouds, but just like, can a movie just stand on its legs for just being a good film and not having all this like baggage with everything? Just like help us see good movies again. That's what I want to get out of it, and that's all I'm gonna say about it. I don't want to dwell on this much longer. So
I mean, what's ironic is that at the same time last year we reviewed 2 great movies, so we know that there are good movies out there.
Absolutely.
We looked at the holdovers in American fiction, so we know people can make good movies. I think it's just a matter of choice, and that's what I find so distressing is the fact that we know, studios are capable of making good movies. The question is, are you willing to do that? And I think the answer here is no. But that's my conclusion. But that's going to wrap up our review of Emilia Perez. Let us know down in the comments below what you think. Did you enjoy Emilia Perez, or did you find it as interesting as we did? And as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one.